the fight is going on in the West Asia. The United States is going to get back to the war. The blockade, as Donald Trump announced yesterday, is going to be back, and the fight is going on between Iran and the United States. There were many targets last night and the night before in the southern part of Iran, in the western part of Iran, and we had many footages coming out of Iran. Basically, we didn't have that much coming out of Jordan, coming out of Kuwait or Bahrain. And one of the footages in Iran was this in the Syriac area. Yeah, you see the blast happening in the Syriac area in the southern part of Iran. I'm going to bring up the map here to mention what were the targets so far. Last night's targets were this map here, and as you see here in the southern part of Iran, in the eastern and the western part of the Strait of Hormuz, you see Bandar Kangan and Bandar Abbas, Kish Island, Syriac area, Jam, Jask, and Konarak. These were the attacks last night. And then we had the map of the night before, which basically they used. Last night it was all about the fighter jets going there and hitting the targets. And the night before was basically the attacks were done by HIMARS in Kuwait and Bahrain. As you see here, the targets are the pattern is totally different. The night before, last night, it was all about the western part of Iran using HIMARS in Kuwait. And in Bahrain, they hit some targets close to the Strait of Hormuz. Those were the targets on the part of the United States. Then we had the Iranian response here. And basically, they're mostly focused on the areas in Jordan, here in Jordan. Yeah. They hit the HIMARS in Kuwait at the border between Iraq and Kuwait. And the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain was hit. We had Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, two important points in Oman, which wasn't before the target on the part of Iranians. They have decided to change their targets when it comes to Oman. Oman was the only country that was not attacked during the 39 days of war. And they hit U.S. long-range radar and U.S. Navy logistic port of Duqm in Oman. And finally, we have some footages coming out of Jordan, because what were the basic targets in Jordan, from what we've seen from the announcement of the Iranian government or Iranian army or IRGC, was that the command and control runway in the American airbase in Jordan, and the other one was one of the shelters of the drones. And this was the night before last night. But last night, we have some footages coming out. The question is, what's going on with the air defense system? Look at this footage, Larry. You see, the interceptor goes up to hit the missile, and you see the missile just passing by and hitting the target. There is no interception in this video. More than 1 minute of the target, at least 4 missiles are hitting the targets in Jordan, and none of them, and there is no interception in this video. And there is the other one. It's the second one. The interceptors are going up. And this is the third. Yeah, here is the fourth. there was no interception. The last time I talked with Professor Ted Postel, he said that is the efficiency or the interception on the part of the Patriot system are less than 4%, 2%, 1%, something like that. And I talked with Andrei Martyanov, his understanding was 20 to 30%. And in this video, we haven't seen any sort of interception. So, Larry, here is the situation right now. What is your understanding of what's going on? And Donald Trump getting back to the war, somehow feeling, I don't know, what does he feel militarily or strategically that he wants to get back to the war?
Fundamentally, Nima, I couldn't begin to tell you what Donald Trump feels. Donald Trump has become an enigma on top of being demented, on top of being clearly suffering from some form of megalomania that is indescribable in terms of what he's doing to the world and to this country. But let's back up for a minute. I watched all of Ted Postel's presentation 3 or 4 times. What he is saying and what I think he is saying in terms of, and this is just one little tactical aspect of this conflict, is that PAC-2 and PAC-3s are useless. Lockheed Martin and RTX, formerly Raytheon underneath, are all trying desperately to hide that. They're lying through their teeth. PAC-2 and PAC-3 in terms of intercepting ballistic missiles that are sophisticated, or ballistic missiles, just simply ballistic missiles. In other words, they don't have countermeasures or counter actions that they can take to thwart an air defense system. PAC-2 and PAC-3 cannot beat them, period. I think it's lower than 4% even in terms of success rate. Now, Lockheed Martin doesn't want anybody to know that. The United States doesn't want anybody to know that, especially people like Zelensky and Europeans who continue to back Zelensky, because he's going to build these things in his own country at great expense, time, and effort. If he ever gets there, I don't think he will. But should he, he's going to be building an obsolete system. Obsolete. Now let's look at some more tactical aspects of it. They're not really important, except as they illustrate the absolute deficit of a real strategic approach by the United States. HIMARS. HIMARS is a wealth of systems. It's a system that exists in terms of multiple launch rockets that go 15 or 20 kilometers with extended range even further. And it's ATACMS. It's a single outfit ATACMS, all in the HIMARS system. So when you say HIMARS, you are saying a range of essentially missile-like, artillery-like weaponry that ranges from 15 kilometers to 500 kilometers in the case of ATACMS. So HIMARS is not being talked about discreetly and distinctly. It's being conflated with all manner of other things, but all to say, guess why we're using HIMARS? Because we don't have anything else. We have ships sailing around, Nima. Ships on missions sailing around with their canisters not having missiles in them because we don't have missiles to put in them. Think about that for a minute. Think about other threats like that might materialize around Taiwan, or other things like Putin getting really angry in Europe and doing more than he's doing right now. Thank you very much. He's roundly defeating Ukraine. You wouldn't know that from the propaganda campaign we have going on out of Paris, Berlin, everywhere else, including Washington. But he is winning decisively now. And it's only a matter of time until that decisiveness puts Ukraine on its back foot so badly that Zelensky is going to probably be assassinated or run out of town or whatever. I don't know. But all of this is tactical garbage because there is no strategic approach. Neither in Ukraine is there a strategic approach other than the psychological warfare campaign we're running at full blast, nor in Southwest Asia is there a strategic approach. Now, is there a top strategy that functions behind Trump and says, why are we doing this? I think there probably is. And I think it's all about China. I've said this so many times. It's all about China. It's trying to get at China indirectly, if you will, and very imperfectly, and to thwart what is increasingly becoming the giant in the world that the United States is going to be stomped on by. Look at what China is doing right now, for example, just with the oil markets. China has become, not because it's OPEC or Russia or the United States or Saudi Arabia or whatever producing oil and other products like that. It's become a determinant in the world oil market, price, quantity, timing, and everything else, because it is a consumer par excellence. And right now, were it to go ahead with its plans to replenish its vast strategic petroleum reserve, you would see the oil markets disturbed majorly, not by a country that produces oil and wants the prices to go up, but by a country that uses the oil. Add to that the fact that China has so much renewable energy now and so much coal in storage that it could put its oil on hold for an entire period of time, economic and otherwise, and say to the world, go to hell. We've got plenty of energy. We are self-sufficient. You are looking at the economic engine of the world emanating from Beijing. And we are fighting that tooth and nail in both of those theaters, Ukraine and Europe and Southwest Asia. And we're doing it incoherently because Donald Trump knows nothing of what I've just said. Donald Trump is operating from the seat of his pants, which are dirty. And so we have no strategy. And what we're doing is running out of munitions, running out of capacity to really take care of a security threat were it to materialize suddenly, and running out of people in the world who give a damn about the status of our empire because they hate our guts. Look at what Rubio is doing in Venezuela. Look at the money we have stolen from Venezuela, somewhere north of 300 billion US dollars. We are essentially running that country with Rubio as the viceroy. Watch out, Brazil. He's got you in mind too. Watch out, Cuba. He's definitely got you in mind. This is the empire now, run rampant in the world, using its military to advertise that rampant nature, and not having a real coherent strategy other than these big guys up above. Doug McGregor and others call them globalists. I think they're much more than that. I think they're vestiges of the neoconservatives. They're vestiges of the people who've always been with us in this country, mostly in the Republican Party, who see the war instrument as the principal instrument of American power and hegemony, and have made it now the exclusive instrument along with sanctions. And this is an exhibition of that. So talking about HIMARS, talking about PAC 2 and PAC 3 is just demonstrative of the trouble the empire is in. At the same time, demonstrative of the lack of a real strategy and demonstrative of what's going to happen if we stay on this tack for very long. It's going to be really bad economically for the world, economically for the United States. And in the long haul, I think it's going to influence the midterms in this country in a big way. And if we weren't going to see a coup d'etat attempt, we certainly probably are now, but I think it's going to fail. I think it's going to fail in a civil war-like situation. I don't know how hot this civil war will get, but I think it's going to be drastic for the empire. And I think it's all going to come to a head very, very shortly. We're lying right now about inflation, about affordability, about jobs creation, and so forth. But Scott Besson can only lie for so long till the American people wake up and go out and smell the roses and see how bad their lives are getting. When the diesel runs out, when the farmers can't plant their crops, when there is no corn for ethanol, when all of the things that have to happen pretty much seriatim and have to happen successfully, or things turn badly quickly, are going to happen. That's where we are. So I hate to say that talking about HIMARS and Bandar Abbas versus Isfahan or whatever is nonsense. It's not nonsense to Iranians who are on the other end of these bombs, of course, but it's nonsense in terms of the bigger picture, what's happening to the empire, and by that extension of the empire's problems to the world. It isn't going to be pretty. In another month or two, it's going to be very dramatically different, I think, unless we change course immediately. And I don't see Donald Trump doing that. I don't see him doing it in Europe, and I don't see him doing it in Southwest Asia, and I don't see him doing it domestically. I see him tightening down and becoming even more demented and even more incapable of any kind of strategic thought that's meaningful. And here's the kicker. Let me take you back to a telephone call that Colin Powell got when he was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff from then a very important member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Chuck Hagel, who would later be one of Obama's secretaries of defense. That telephone call was Chuck Hagel talking to Chairman Powell about the list he was looking at on his desk. The list were the list of 3 stars to be promoted and 4 stars to be promoted, 3s to 4s and 4s to be on the list. And Hagel said to Powell, I don't see a single name on this list that I would make a unified command commander, a service chief, let alone replace you as chairman, or some other important 3 or 4 star position. I don't see a single name. What's wrong, Colin? And they had a long discussion about how the services, all the services, every single one of them, had created, with the exception of the Coast Guard, and I could talk about that if you wanted to, but all the services had created a system that promoted people who were incompetent in warfighting, incompetent in ethics, incompetent in anything you want to talk about that gives a general or a flag officer the prospect of a future that's successful for his country. There weren't any. That's what Chuck Hagel was telling him. We are reaping the whirlwind of that right now. We have no one that I can detect that hasn't been fired. One Navy 3-star, an Army 2-star, an Army 4-star who was going along with everything until he got fired, Randy George, and then he started speaking out. But no one's saying anything. Kane is not saying anything that I can detect. Kane is going along with all this. Hegseth is telling him to what he can say and what he can do. We're doomed in the Department of War to idiocy. I can't make this up how bad it is. It is absolutely the end of any kind of rational strategic thought in terms of our security complex, as far as I can tell. There is no one thinking rationally, thinking ahead of time, thinking in time, and thinking strategically. So we're going to see more of this, just more and more of it. We're going to see this business in the Gulf continue, whether we're using the North Channel, the South Channel, the Qatari suggestion of a Central Channel, which will never float with Iran, or whether we're doing confounding the situation in Lebanon, which is now, despite the talks I think they're in Italy, going nowhere because Netanyahu doesn't want them to go anywhere. And Netanyahu's focused now on an election that looks increasingly like, and he's going more criminal in every day that passes, he's going to lose. And he is scared to death of that. So we are ripe for a disaster plus in the world right now, led by Southwest Asia and the incoherence, utter incoherence of what the U.S. is doing there.
What is the difference this time around comparing to what it was during the 40 days war? The United States is getting back, with the blockade, with the attacks. And do you see any sort of change in their strategy right now?
I see dramatic change coming, I think. And I think you just showed some of the footage of the foretelling of that dramatic change. And that is Iran going full Monty, if you will, on other and far more significant and strategic targets. Like, for example, those in Saudi Arabia that would truly take about 12 to 15% of the oil off the market instantly. And I think there are a lot of people in the oil market business right now who are watching this from a number of perspectives, but that is the most dramatic one. And there's some, of course, as Trump does all the time, and his cronies are going to play it for all it's worth in terms of capitalizing on the rise in prices and the sink in prices and the volatility of the markets. But one thing is happening right now that's got them all very concerned. And I've checked all the oil channels I know with regard to this. New York Times even had a piece on it, although the New York Times piece was somewhat incoherent. And that is what I just talked about. China's ability now, because of its hugely successful economic posture, China's ability to influence the oil markets from an absolutely reverse direction than anybody thought. In other words, I'm not going to buy that oil, or I am going to buy that oil. and I'm going to buy it from Iran, and I'm going to get it from Iran, or whatever the move might be, combination of those or the other, or one side or the other, either refraining or jumping in big time. China can influence the oil markets to a significant extent, even to the point of WTI and Brent crude going up and down in a very fluctuating way that used to be only possible if OPEC or someone like that, a cartel, Russia, said, oh, I'm withholding oil from the market, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that. And guess what? Russia just did too. Russia just denied diesel. Guess what the United States is going to be short of at the end of July, big time? Diesel. And Russia has said, Putin has said, okay, diesel only for internal use. Diesel's not going on the market. Wow, where are you going to get your diesel, United States? You can't refine it. You can't do it to the extent and the amount that you need. So what are your truckers going to do? What are your needs for diesel on the farm and so forth, if they can even get their farming going? We're talking about Donald Trump being completely unaware of all of this, I think. And it's because he has a cabinet that is either completely unaware or too frightened to tell him about it. And we're talking about thus no positive action happening until the positive action itself might even add to the drama of the collapse. This is the bigger picture, despite all the brouhaha in the Gulf, the bigger picture is twofold for that conflict. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz. Iran will not give up control of the Strait of Hormuz. Doesn't matter how you parse that business. If you force Oman to be on your side and take your position with regard to that channel, the one that runs along their coastline, you're still not going to keep Iran from influencing that channel. And increasingly, they will influence it if that is the linchpin of their strategy, the forward linchpin, and they have to do it. They will do it. The backward linchpin of that strategy is not sanctions relief, reparations, all the rest. The back end of that is the nuclear program. And guess what? We are making zero progress on the nuclear program. And one has to ask oneself, is Ted Postol right, or other people right, who are saying that Iran has made a decision and can build a nuclear weapon, may indeed have built a nuclear weapon already and is holding it in abeyance until it means something, until they see what Netanyahu is going to do with his stockpile or whatever. But those are the two key issues. They're like gates. The Strait of Hormuz and its control, which the United States has not regained in any way, fashion, or form, and this bombing does not do anything to help that. And the nuclear program, which is ultimately Trump's goal, supposedly, which is now out of reach, I think, out of reach. So we failed. The war is lost.